You've probably heard of Friedrich Nietzsche, right? The guy who famously declared, God is dead. But what if I told you that the man who wrote a book literally called The Antichrist had this deep, hidden admiration for Jesus himself? Yeah, it sounds like a total contradiction, but that's the paradox we're going to unpack right now. And this quote? This is our key. For Nietzsche, this was a firewall, a hard separation between the man, Jesus, and the massive religious institution that was built in his name. To really get what he meant, we have to follow him down a pretty wild and fascinating rabbit hole. Okay, so to understand Nietzsche's point of view, you've got to forget theology completely. I mean, just throw it out the window. He wasn't interested in Jesus as some divine figure. No, he was interested in him as a psychological type. He basically performs an autopsy on the soul of the Nazarene to figure out what made him tick. And here's his diagnosis. Nietzsche saw Jesus not as a hero, but as a neurasthenic, someone with an almost pathologically sensitive nervous system. I mean, imagine a person where every conflict, every harsh reality causes them genuine, almost physical pain. For Nietzsche, this meant Jesus' teachings weren't just a set of lofty moral ideas. They were the direct product of his unique body, his physiology. To build on that, Nietzsche borrows a concept from the novelist Dostoevsky, the holy idiot. And look, this is not an insult. It describes someone with a childlike simplicity so profound that they become an anti-realist. They literally can't process our complex world of guilt, sin, punishment, and revenge. For a mind like that, the only things that are truly real are inner realities, feelings, bliss, a sense of peace. And this is where it gets really radical. This rereads Jesus' most famous teaching. For Nietzsche's Jesus, turning the other cheek wasn't some noble moral choice. It was a physiological survival mechanism. It was an instinct. He recoiled from conflict because his entire being simply couldn't handle it. His whole life became a flight from the harshness of the outer world into the safety of an inner one. And what you end up with is a complete flip of the original message. You see, Jesus' évangile, his good news, was all about an immediate inner state of being. The kingdom of heaven wasn't a place you go to when you die. It was a condition of the heart you could access right now. But the church, Nietzsche says, created a désevangile, or bad news. By turning faith into a rigid system, the kingdom into a future reward, and morality into a set of ironclad law. So how did this even happen? How did a message about finding a kingdom inside yourself become a global religion of sin, redemption, and an afterlife? Well, for Nietzsche, this was no accident. It was a great betrayal, and it was the deliberate work of one single, brilliant, and in his view, very dangerous man. So if the only true Christian died on the cross, then who built the religion we call Christianity? Who was the architect? For Nietzsche, the answer was blunt, and he was absolutely certain about it: the Apostle Paul. Now, to get Paul's motive, you have to understand this key Nietzschean idea: resentment. It's this poisonous, simmering resentment that the powerless feel towards the powerful. And since they can't get actual revenge in the real world, they get what Nietzsche called an imaginary revenge. They just flip morality upside down. They declare the master's strength and confidence to be evil, and they rebrand their own weakness and humility as good. And this chart just lays out the whole transformation perfectly. Jesus' values, born from this inner bliss, get totally replaced by Paul's values, born from pure resentment. The idea of a loving Father within you becomes a judging God above you. And this is the big one. The cross is no longer a demonstration of how to live without resistance. It becomes a gruesome sacrifice to pay for a concept, sin, that Jesus himself wouldn't have even understood. But look, Nietzsche didn't just want to tear everything down. He knew he had to build something in its place. He saw this crisis coming, the death of God, which would leave this massive void of meaning in Western culture. His answer wasn't to invent a new God, but to propose a new goal for all of humanity. And that goal is the Overman, or the Übermensch. This is not a replacement God. It's more like a blueprint for what human beings could become now that we're free from divine command. The whole point is for us to create our own values, our own meaning, right here on this earth, without needing the promise of some other world to justify them. And this is where you can see Nietzsche's design so clearly. The Overman is the systematic, psychological opposite of the Nazarene. Where Jesus fled from pain, the Overman embraces it as a way to grow stronger. Where Jesus escaped into an inner world, the Overman affirms this world, the real world. It's a total pivot from passive non-resistance to an active, creative, world-shaping drive that he called the will to power. So the virtues of this new ideal are all about life affirmation. It's self-mastery, courage in the face of a tough reality, creativity, and, this is a big one, being faithful to the earth. For Nietzsche, looking to some heavenly reward was a betrayal of the only existence we know we have. The Overman says a powerful yes to all of it, the good and the bad. And all of this leads us to the absolute climax of Nietzsche's entire philosophy. He boiled this massive historical struggle down to one final, epic opposition. Two symbols, two archetypes, battling for the very meaning of suffering and life itself. And the split here couldn't be more extreme. On one side, you have the crucified, who represents the idea that suffering is an objection to life. It's proof that this world is flawed, that we need to be redeemed from it. It's a fundamental no to existence. But on the other side, you have Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and tragic joy, who says suffering is an essential, even creative part of life. To say yes to life, you have to say yes to the pain too. It is a total yes to everything. And this is it. This is the very last line Nietzsche ever wrote for publication, the final sentence of his autobiography. It's this dramatic, almost desperate plea. He saw his entire life's work as setting the stage for this one great battle for the soul of humanity. But here's the tragic part. This great battle wasn't just a metaphor in a book. It was a war that Nietzsche lived with inside himself every single day. And in the end, this massive intellectual conflict became a devastating reality that literally tore his mind apart. The timeline is just shocking. In 1888, he's on fire, finishing his most explosive books. Then, on January 3rd, 1889, in Turin, Italy, he sees a man whipping a horse in a public square. Nietzsche runs to the horse, throws his arms around its neck to protect it, and collapses. He would never recover his sanity. In the days right after his breakdown, he wrote these bizarre little notes that we now call the madness letters, and they show a complete flip in his personality. All of a sudden, the great prophet of a godless world is talking like a mystic, about a world transfigured and full of heavenly joy. And then comes the signature on a letter to one of his friends. It's chilling. He signs it, The Crucified. The very man who had spent his career analyzing and fighting this archetype was now becoming it. His delusions just got deeper, and he started merging his own suffering with a biblical figure he had both admired and reviled. He saw himself as a martyr, persecuted by his enemies, just like the Christ in the Gospels. But, and this is the craziest part, at the exact same time, he signed other letters Dionysus. In his final coherent moments, the two great opposing forces of his entire life's work, Dionysus and the Crucified, they just fused together inside his broken mind. It was a catastrophic synthesis. The battle was over, and it seems both sides had won. And this leaves us with this huge, lingering question. That final act of overwhelming pity for a suffering animal, the very Christian compassion he had spent his life condemning as a weakness, was that proof that his philosophy was ultimately unlivable? Or was it something else? Was it the tragic human confirmation of the struggle at the very heart of his work? A struggle between our will to overcome and that deep instinct for compassion that maybe lives inside all of us. It's a paradox he left for us to figure out.